Excuse my look today. We've got a senior event.
I think you're looking pretty good.
Well,
I think
thank
we're
you.
ready to begin.
Ready to begin? So I believe Sharon's on the agenda for the teacher evaluation piece. Is there something prior to that, Reverend Matias?
No, was it? I thought it was Mary Jo, but it's Sharon. I don't know why I thought that.
Let me grab my agenda.
Fine. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, all right.
Teacher evaluations.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
And so Eric Harmson, I don't know, maybe I'll move down here, Eric, so you can see. Eric Harmson is with me. Eric, can you tell them your title?
I am the Director of HR Strategy and Talent Performance.
And in his role, he basically manages the teacher evaluation system for us. But I wanted to just give you a little introduction, and then we had some questions that we answered. So Mary Jo, we work on we initially and still do work collaboratively with the other cabinet members around the evaluation system. So we work with the assistant superintendent and the executive directors, and Mary Jo Coleman is a part of that. And she handles primarily the professional development pieces that are, where the evaluation is involved. But our office leads the administration of the evaluation. So just so that you understand those different roles.
Excuse me, Ms. Pitts, could you tell me again, what is this gentleman's name?
Eric Harmson.
Okay.
E-R-I-C-H. It's Eric, yes.
German.
Yes.
German.
C-H.
I think it's more of last being the last of six. And
They ran out of names.
Yes.
had,
And Eric is a former teacher and principal, so he knows a lot about these workings, and he also is a certified evaluator and serves as a second evaluator a lot of times, and is an expert that comes in and provides support. So a lot of times, and you'll see when we need a second evaluator, an independent evaluator, a lot of times he'll come in and serve in that role. So we, as you know, after the dust settled in 2013, when the law came out and told us what needed to be an evaluation system, I had just come, but we got together with principals, some of the cabinet, Dr. Gorman, Ms. Coleman, Ms. Evans, and several other administrators, as well as teachers, and we went through a lot of the components that the law required. We had engaged David Stikes with Basis Policy Research because he had a lot of expertise, not just locally, but nationally, to help us come up with an objective evaluation system where there could be accountabilities that met the law, but that still was fair for teachers. So together we collaborated around this system. It's taken some iterations because after that first year, we went back to our focus group. We asked teachers for some comments and some feedback, and they did give us some, and we did make some changes to it. And over the years, since 2003, based on some feedback that we continue to get, we continue to try to tweak it. And of course, you know that the law is driving a lot of it in terms of the student achievement portion of it, how much we have to attribute to the student achievement portion. So that's how it got developed. It is a best practice. We have been touted across the state of Michigan for having one of the best, in quotes, evaluation systems, and we feel that overall it is fair, and as you will see from some of the data that we provided and that Mr. Harmson will go through, that we have less and less pushback on it from teachers, and we've done a lot of training in the beginning of anything, you have ups and downs. You know, some of our evaluators didn't really know how to use the tool. It was something very different, even though we were using the Charlotte Danielson. But we continue to work with them. We'll talk a little bit about, we had Cambridge Education Services come in and do real training for our evaluators. So we could do a lot of inter-rater reliability to make sure that people were seeing what everybody that was looking at it was using a certain set of guidelines and principles. So our overall objective is to have it be as objective as possible, although we do still have some subjectivity, and that is not always a bad thing. I mean, people, sometimes you don't want numbers to drive everything, especially when, you know, we know that teaching is an art as well as a science, so we did want to leave some flexibility for that. So with that, I'm sure you've had a chance to really delve into the document, but we wanted Mr. Harmson to kind of go over it on a high level. And then, I don't know, Reverend Matias, how you'd like to take questions, but however you'd like us to answer questions.
Yeah, I think throughout we could probably ask some questions. One of the first ones I had is, you know, and I noticed that you have here that you work with the GREA members in that process. Have they ever reported here in conjunction with a report like this, or?
Well, we didn't work with, we did not, I want to be clear, we did not work with the union in terms of the union establishment. We did work with teachers. We had teachers from every level so that we could get a different perspective based on what they needed. And as you could see, as you would be able to see through our document, we have different levels of how much certain things would be weighted depending on whether you were teaching a specific subject or, you know, like in elementary where you're really not teaching, you know, we have reading and math, but then some of those other subjects. So we took all of those into consideration. One of the things is that the evaluation system is a prohibited subject of bargaining. So we did not want to get into any of that, although I can tell you that Mr. Harmson has spent countless hours with first Paul Helder and then with Mary Bowens. In fact, they just recently met where they went over the evaluation system, and he was able to answer some questions.
So one of the things that I work with Mary with is, first of all, just to keep that communication open. So her and I will talk, we'll meet, usually just formally a couple times a year, but then through emails and phone calls and sharing data and information. So that's one way we get feedback is through that communication with Mary. But I'll just give you an example is, so we have some teachers who have struggled the last couple of years, and our goal as a district is always to improve the practice of those teachers. And Mary and I will either talk on the phone and say, okay, where are folks struggling, and what building are they at? So I can provide, so Mary can provide support too. So we work together that way to provide support for our teachers who may need more support, providing data through the appeals process. And I think that's really one of the strengths of the evaluation process is that there's a lot of checks and balances, and it holds everybody accountable. It holds the district accountable. It holds evaluators accountable, and it holds the teachers and principals accountable. So, and we've always focused it on being a growth model. And obviously there's some employment decisions that are made, but every training that I do for principals, all the communication materials that I provide. Staff, teachers, principals, always focuses on that's a growth model. It's a way to improve practice because that's really the true leverage to improve student outcomes is through the system. I mean, I was a principal, I was a teacher. I understand how much time it takes to do these things, and it's important to do it correctly. And the biggest power in this process is that it is used by our teachers and our principals to grow it's not just something I do. I mean, I remember when I was a teacher, you'd have your administrator come in usually last week or two of school, because I have to do an event, I have to get this, and you would sign it. There was no, no consistency. It was whatever the principal's idea of good teaching and learning was, and we've come a long ways from that.
One of the ways that I think we have worked with the union, the GREA has done some professional development for teachers that I think has been really helpful and really good, based on some areas that they've seen that teachers need. So I know that they offer, and they tried to offer some things. I don't know if they're still going to do it this year because of some of the changes and some of the issues with just how the state looks at what they can get for their certification. I know last year and the years before that, they had put on some good professional development for teachers to try to assist. So that I know.
And a lot of times in the appeals process at the end of the year, they're involved too, and we'll work together to make sure that we have all the data and all the information that we need to have. So it's because when we make decisions and we look at the evaluation, our number one priority is to make sure it's fair, it's valid, and reliable. And if we're going to make decisions regarding folks and their practice and their maybe their career, that we want to make sure that we've done it in a fair way and an objective way, and have treated people fairly. I think it's really a strength of our evaluation. We go above and beyond what the law states on appeals. I think it's one of the smartest things we've done as a district. That again, it keeps us accountable, keeps evaluators accountable, and it gives our employees a fair shake at things. And I don't. You want me to walk through? You want me to? Just
Yeah, why don't you just walk through some highlights,
Sure.
if that's all right?
Yep.
Okay.
So student growth, 25% this year. It's been nice because the state's been really moving that all around in the last couple of years. They've kept it at 25%. However, next year it is moving to 40%. The final score has to be student growth. We are again working with Basis Policy, and Steve Petros and our data system department works closely. So we have some of the leading experts in the country helping design our student growth. So that will be changing next year. 50% of student growth must be measured using the state assessments in subject areas and grade levels where there is a state test.
And I know we have a legislative position on this, but, we actually do like the 25%. We do think that that's probably the right proportion, but the state doesn't agree with us, so we're going to have to obviously move up to what they're telling us to do.
It is going to be 50. I heard at one point they were going to 40.
It's going to be 40, but 50% of that, so 20% of that has to be their instrument, which is MSTEP, I believe we're using for that?
MSTEP.
MSTEP. Mm-hmm.
It is, but you are right. Eventually, it's going to 50. As the law is 50%. There's a lot of. I think I could see that being changed back down to 40%. There's as this is
A lot of pushback on that.
pushback, and some of the research says 50% maybe
It's
too
just
much.
too high.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
hopefully that has changed. That will change sooner rather than later, so we can plan for it. But we are in the planning stages and are coming up with a model to hit the 40% next year and the 50%.
So next year, we will move to 50% and hope they change it?
No, 40%.
40, okay.
Total.
Okay.
And then half of that 40% has to be state assessment,
Which is MSTEP.
MSTEP.
Step, okay.
And this year, we're preparing in some of our communication, we're preparing our teachers for that move, so that next year they're not completely blindsided by the impact of that.
And we have a basis policy, and they're doing some analysis of our data, nationwide data around what is the best way to calculate that percentage. Because we have to use 3 years of student growth if we have it. How do we use that 3 years? What's the best measure to do that? So we're looking at some models around that. It's really, one of the great things is that we're not, it's so important we're not just shooting in the dark and coming up with something. We're doing very thoughtful, very data-driven, again, with Basis, who's a national expert. I think they've designed Arizona's system to get that data information so we can make good decisions around that.
And we're also looking at our own data too, seeing how our teachers are trending so that we're not just, as Eric says, we're looking at it nationally best practices, but we're also seeing how our own teachers are trending.
How does that turn out? And when you look at the data for our teachers, how do they compare, their scores compare to the scores of the nation? National norm or what?
Well, no, on certain pieces of this, we can tell you that, but not on the whole system.
Because it's not developed yet?
Well, no, because you have to have similar systems, and every state has different systems.
I see.
You see,
Okay,
so
okay. So nothing's really normed then?
right. Well, NWEA, we can tell you that piece of it,
Okay.
but like MSTEP, we wouldn't be able to
Right,
because
okay.
that's not a national test. We can tell you that on Tripod because that has a wider.
And now, tell me about tripod. I'm not
So
familiar.
Tripod is the student survey. So a piece of like best practice, and I think tremendous research says that students should have a voice in their own learning and in what's happening in the classroom. And so that's our teacher, that's how students give feedback about their teachers, and the teachers also give feedback about the school administrators. So it goes up there, and it's a small percentage of our evaluation system. What is it now?
It's 10%?
It's 10%
So,
now.
every student, I mean, like little kids or?
Every student, as long as there's more than 10 students, they're kindergarten students, all the way up. Yes, and there's a lot of national research on that.
But I mean, like, some kids can't, do they do it on a computer? Is it read to them? I mean, in terms of little kids?
Sometimes it depends
Read.
on the grade. It's read to them. Some do it on the computer. It depends
And
on.
it's a sheet of paper the kids get that they fill out about their teacher, or?
Hey, Ron, do you know
And parents.
how it's actually administered? I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
It's computer-based assessment, but again, kindergarten level support with that.
Okay, because it must not be that big of a deal, because, Kira and Kayla have gone through, they've never once said anything about, so it must be really,
Typically, kindergarten kids like their teachers.
Just to give clarification about the tripod, a couple things I think is important is that, so the student survey, the national data is showing that is the best predictor of student growth. So if a teacher has a high score in a student survey, then more than likely their student growth is. And again, it's another piece of information and data for a teacher, and it's just not a score.
is
If you
there
look
any
at,
possibility I could just see one that you might give out to?
No.
No, because you don't want the kids to be.
Yeah, because we can tell you the types of questions, but we don't give out the test for obvious reasons. But we can tell you all, because we have said just the general types of questions that they'll ask. There are 7 C's in there, like care, what's some of the other ones? Control, and certain ones of these are more of a predictor. But it kind of makes sense if you have a good relationship with your students. Obviously, there's going to be a better culture in the classroom and a better interaction, and some of it is in that. Does the student feel like the teacher really cares about them? Are they pushing them in a good way? Are they giving them complex material? Because kids know when they're things are being dummied down for them, or when they are really being challenged, because most children want to be challenged, but they want to be supported around that. And is the classroom under control? I mean, obviously, there's not going to be a lot of learning if there's tons of disruption in the classroom.
So even though it might be kindergarten kids taking it the same kinds of information, you're looking for the same kinds of information that you could get from a kid who's in 11th or 12th grade?
Everyone, yes, ma'am. They're all taking it's the same test.
And is it something that somebody else has devised for us, or have we?
Yes, Ron Ferguson out of Harvard has really was the pioneer of this, and it's been validated. Many systems are using it. One of the issues with it, and I want to be real transparent about this, is that they haven't given us a lot of feedback on ways. So if I'm low on it, what are some of the things that I can do to improve on it? So we've been trying to work on that ourselves, figuring out how we can help support teachers in getting improving in the areas where they see that they're not. And we also do look at the correlation between the tripod score and the Danielson observation score and your student growth score. A lot of times there are correlations. I mean, when you have a good teacher that cares, you see that the student growth is high, and they get and they're usually pretty highly effective teachers. So.
Well, let's continue as you flush out some of that. I'm sure it'll answer some of our questions as well.
Okay. So the next component, sir?
Sure,
So
so-
after that was 25% was for the student data, and now we're going to the 75%.
So another strength, too, of our system is that we have multiple measures. So it's based on several components of good instruction, good practice. So we have student growth, we have the tripod, we have the classroom observation rating, professional development credits earned. So we want to reinforce behaviors and strategies in the system that will improve practice. So obviously going to professional development and improving your practice will help improve your practice. Educator attendance, so how much do I show up to work? And there's a lot of research that's been coming out recently about how important that is to have the teacher in the classroom. And so we've built that into the system. And then your professional responsibilities, so are you doing all those other things to be part of a team and to improve practice? Because we know when teachers are working together and cooperating, that's going to improve outcomes for students. So again, that's part of when we designed the system. We just didn't want, our goal wasn't just to get an evaluation score and rating at the end of the year. It was to put into the system and reinforce in the system practice that will improve outcomes for students. So I'll explain the connection between student test scores and teacher evaluation. I think we talked about that already. Is
I
it
know
in
that-
line with the state mandates?
I just have a question.
Yeah.
So sometimes on the classroom observation, I know we've gotten feedback that either some of it was done either too late or not in time. How are we faring, at least this year, in regards to really our administrators getting to our teachers and appropriating time to have the time to really help them?
Every year we get better and better and provide support to make sure those are done on time. So we just have our first deadline is
The end of the month.
no, right now for probationary for their first observations, and we have the executive directors can look at observations. We keep a track on that. I provide support, so if we have somebody who's falling behind, can I come in, can I find somebody else to help you with your observations? Last year we had a brand new administrator with lots of observations, so I went in and did some of her observations. If we have a supervisor that's out, then I'll go in. So we are doing much better. Every year we get better and better. We've reinforced with the principals and the evaluators, they need to get this done. It's part of their evaluation, how well they do that. I think I'll get into the appeal data a little later, but last year we only had 9 people appeal their final evaluation rating. So I think that shows that people are not saying, okay, this is, that shows that we're doing it correctly, because people don't have a reason to appeal at the end. And again, I think that's why it was smart of us to put in those checks and balances to hold us accountable. And
You'll see in the beginning, the first year we did this, we had a lot of appeals, and we returned quite a few on procedural grounds that, if you don't meet the timelines, that's a serious flaw, and it's a flaw because then teachers don't have sufficient time to improve. It's not just because you missed the timeline. And it's really not fair to tell somebody at the 11th hour, oops, you didn't cut it, because then we didn't give them the support that they needed to improve. So and that's one of the things that Eric does, and he sends out constant reminders and things like that to try to make sure that people do stay on those timelines.
And how much does the union get involved in that, or how do you guys communicate with some of those things? I'm sure that they probably say, hey, my deadline is coming up, or they haven't evaluated me yet. I'm concerned because
I know Mary is a wonderful conduit of information for us. I mean, she spends a lot of time trying to problem solve with us around a lot of those issues, and I know that
this week Mary sent me an email and said, hey, I heard this is going on, can you check it out? And I'll make a phone call and see what's going on and get back with Mary and say, again, because it's our number one priority is make sure it's fair and reliable and consistent, and so everything we do is around that, and I appreciate Mary giving me those phone calls and the back and forth that we have to be able to take care of these, because it is, we need to have, I think that's why it's so good to have somebody like me in HR, who understands the importance of it, to be able to say, we have to do it fairly. And it's, you don't want to be at the end of the year being an evaluator and have your evaluation overturned. You're going to hear about it.
Yeah, and we do get support from Dr. Gorman and the executive directors when we see that there's, some folks that are just seem to not be listening. And once we involve them, things tend to start moving. So we don't have to do that very much anymore.
Yeah.
So
So we talked about how
how
metrics line up with state mandates. Obviously, we follow the state mandates, but we go beyond that, again, to make sure that it's a robust system and actually measures what we want it to measure. Important timelines, evaluation orientations in early October. And one of the things that I think we've done that is very different than most districts is we have a very comprehensive evaluation guidebook that we send out every year. We've been doing it for many years, and it is has the overview of the system, it has the process, the steps, explains everything, and then down to the minutia of how to calculate your final score if you want to do that. So it's I think a 75-page document. I got some feedback from actually from somebody from the state saying, wow, this is really comprehensive. I haven't seen this. So we're really strong about communicating the information. So the guidebook is just the start of it. I provide all the principles with a PowerPoint orientation. So again, to build consistency across the district that they use for this orientation meeting. So it walks through the steps of the evaluation process. Again, provide consistency and a way to support the principals. So that's in early October, and then the goals in the end of October. So another real strength of our system is that it's differentiated based on the needs of the individual teachers. So obviously, new teachers in my first year, I'm going to at least need 2 goals, first or second year. But depending on my practice as a probationary teacher, then I may only have 1 goal. In my 3rd year or even my 2nd year, if I'm a strong practitioner, Tenured teachers, most of them have just one goal, again, unless they feel like they need additional support. And then tenured teachers who do need additional support will have at least two IDP goals in areas that they struggle with. And having them, I talked about the multiple measures and data points, that really helps the teacher and the principal come up with a very targeted plan. So, okay, we have really good data. Look at, this says under control in the tripod, you struggle in this area. In the Danielson rubric under classroom management, you struggle in these, so let's write a goal around there. So it's a very strong and robust system. And the other part is that, again, the feedback on your goals. So if I'm a probationary teacher, I'm going to need feedback from my evaluator, so the system is designed that way. But if I'm a tenured teacher, I can self-reflect on my goals. So there's, throughout the process, there are those opportunities. And I always talk about, when you have your evaluation process, you have 2 to 4 observations in a year, and you have that pre-observation conference for the scheduled ones and a post-observation, and we have very specific questions for that, but we want you to use those questions throughout your practice every day. So when you look at a lesson, what data are you using to design that lesson? How did that work? Would I do anything differently? So again, it was just another way to put best practice.
One of the things, since we went to the teachers that had 3 years of highly effective not evaluating them, which has been really good. I mean, those teachers don't need, they're the master teachers. And it's freed up the administrator then to be able to spend their time and focus on the teachers that do need support, as opposed to just checking off a box on the teachers that really don't need it. So that's been something that we've been happy that we were able to take advantage of that provision in the law to allow us to do that.
Yeah, it's helpful to see the timeline and just kind of get an overall picture on where it's landing, especially when we're seeing either tough times or things are going on, to know, to just have a sense of that aspect of our, if you will, system.
And we're happy if you would like to share with you the entire booklet,
I would like to see that, because you can calculate your score. I mean, a teacher could calculate his or her own score on that.
Yes, and we, initially we had a lot of questions about how to do that, but I
Is it
think teachers
online?
have gotten better.
Yeah,
It is,
it's
yes,
online.
it's on our, is it? Yes, it's online.
Okay, so where do I find it?
In
The transparency
yeah,
report?
I'll make
in
sure
our-
it's the updated
Yeah,
one.
we'll make sure that we have our updated one. We have it on InfoHost, but the transparency report, we have to put our evaluation system out there too, so you should be able to find that, and if it's not the current one, we'll make sure we have that out there.
And what exactly is it called?
Teacher evaluation?
Just
An
that's what.
educator.
Evaluator, it has evaluation in the title.
Educator evaluation guidebook. I don't know.
The
Sure,
other,
something we put way more thought into than we had to when we named it.
it's another question, just in terms of how that ties into our feeder system, because a lot of times it's, well, I'm getting baggage from this other school that fed them to us, and they're behind, if it's middle school to high school or elementary to middle school. So how is this helping us tighten that as that expectation moves forward, if you will?
Do you mean for the student achievement portion?
For student achievement and also teacher evaluation, I mean, how is that tied into our overall system of education?
Well, we do use our superintendent uses this when we do our placements. So that's a big portion of how we decide to place. A couple of years ago, she indicated that she did not want more than 10% of the staff in the building to be minimally effective, because one of the things that we saw when we first, or at least when we first started this, that there was a disproportionate number sometimes of our least effective teachers in certain buildings. And that was one of the things from an equity lens. And we know how important it is that students, especially struggling students, have higher performing teachers. So every year we look at the data, we provide her the data, we look at it too, principals look at it, and one of the other things that we stopped was allowing principals to involuntarily transfer their lowest performing teachers, because we said that was a practice that was not helpful, so that you could just keep moving teachers. It's not helpful to teachers either, because they can't land someplace and really get support and really figure out, because every building they would go to, there would be a new culture, a new expectation, et cetera. So those were two of the practices that we stopped that we think have helped in terms of the student achievement piece. And because we know too that the other thing that's been really helpful, we started it last year as a pilot, and this year we've, in our negotiation with the union, we actually on the professional development side got more time for the professional learning communities, because those really help teachers, especially struggling teachers, be able to collaborate with teachers that are higher performing. And I have to say, last year we had a little bit of a rough start, because everyone wasn't used to doing it. Our administrators as well as our teachers. It wasn't just on them, but I think we've improved that. We've had some feedback from the union in terms of when it wasn't being used exactly as we thought it was, and Dr. Wormer would help us work with the leadership in terms of getting that straight. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I just think, those are the nuances that when we look at even the achievement that we're seeing and the growth, really overall, K through high school.
I think
This is a conversation that really says this is how we really addressed it. We were able to look at, make tough decisions about how we tweak that or change the culture, if you will. And it's good to dialogue about that and reflect. This is how we got here, or how we're getting out of here. So yeah,
I think we've used evaluation data very strategically, because there's you have the tripod, you have the observation data, you have the student growth, and we use that, and I'll provide that for different folks to help them make better decisions. And we look at some of our schools that struggled at maybe previously priority schools. We use the evaluation data to make staffing decisions. When you look at the end of the year, when we have teachers who are able to interview for different positions that are open in the district, one of the sets of data that we provide the principals to make a good decision is their evaluation data. So we're just making much better decisions based on the data that we get.
And one of the good things this year, the superintendent has those, the CAS schools that we're really focusing intently on, the schools that need a lot of support. And so just, she's looking at the teaching staff as a whole, using the evaluation too as a guide around strategically placing some teachers or being able to use teachers as experts. We have the third grade reading issue that's coming up now, so she's looking at the cadre of reading teachers or teachers that are English language arts teachers that have done well on our evaluation system, and saying how can we utilize those teachers as experts to assist other teachers. So we're starting to use this data to try to do exactly, think what you're saying, Reverend Matias, to try to help drive instruction and provide that peer-on-peer support, which sometimes it's less threatening, you're more open to it, it's not your evaluator. And we know that that really is the most effective kind of support. And not taking people out of the classroom to go and do some sit and gets, to have the stuff right embedded in the school. So as we move on, so we've talked, all our timelines we've talked about.
So probationary teachers all have individual development plans, so again, more targeted. Any of our tenured teachers who the previous year were minimally effective or ineffective, so anybody less than effective will go into the next year already on an IDP to provide support as soon as we possibly can. If I'm a tenured teacher and my first observation, one of two, is less than effective, then that kicks in an IDP again to provide that support right away. One of the changes that we made based on feedback is we added the number of observations for our tenured folks, because what would happen is if I got less than effective on my first observation, if I only have 2 observations, the math makes it almost impossible to be anything other than minimally effective. So we put 4 observations for several reasons. One, to help with the math, but also so there's consistent feedback throughout the process. So when you go up to 4, that's almost one a month. And it improves feedback and improves practice quickly. So, well, one of the things that we do is so I manage all of the folks on IDPs and say, okay, we're going to have a second observer come in. So again, it's another check and balance in the system, creates fairness. So I'll go in and do a second observation, or I'll have, so let's say there's a middle school math teacher who may be struggling. I'll look at all the administrators who they're all certified to be, but who has taught math, and I'll assign them or ask them to go to an observation.
Use the curriculum specialist?
Yes,
the
curriculum specialist, same thing. Again, being strategic with this whole, the whole.
Great.
And it also adds some objectivity to it. Sometimes, especially early on, we had a lot of the principal doesn't like me kind of complaint. We don't have that as much anymore, but in order to give the teacher the benefit of the doubt, we did always brought in someone else from another building or down in the central office to actually look at their teaching.
So appeals process, just to number 7, so we look at that. We go beyond the state law. The state law says ineffective tenured teachers are, by law, get the opportunity, have the right to appeal 2 out of their 3. We make it available to all tenured and probationary teachers are minimally effective or ineffective. So they send us email stating, I want to appeal my rating. It's all the scheduling, everything goes to the executive director of that building. They will run 99% of the time. The executive director who supervises that building will hear the appeal, usually with me, unless I take a week off in the summer, but if Sharon lets me. And so we sit down, but it's not, we go in with a lens like we need to have all the information and data to make a good decision. It's, so they provide, we tell them, bring in a written summary, bring in any evidence of your classroom growth that may be different than what is showing on your evaluation, because they can see all of their scores, all their ratings via a secure website. I open up stages, look at their evaluation, and I'll ask questions around the process. So I see this happen. It looks like this date was late. Is there a reason for it? Yeah, I was sick that week, or my evaluator missed that date, or so we take all that information. I look at their score and ask them, do these look all accurate to you? Do you have, and there's sometimes, I thought I was highly effective, and I'll call the assistant principal, like, oh, I must have hit 2 rather than 3. Yes, that's correct. They're highly effective, and I'll recalculate and change that way. So it's really a process where we want to make sure we have all the information to make a good decision. So we'll take those notes. Most of the time, if it's close, I'll recalculate to make sure everything's correct, and then the executive director will make a decision on whether the appeal should be changed or not. So maybe it was inaccurate rating. If the process and procedures are not followed significantly, we will make a change. Sometimes there's incorrect or incomplete data. We'll make a change. So, because we're always striving to make it as accurate as it possibly can be. So, if we see some reason to change it, we'll change it. If you look at there's a table.
Page
5, we've gone from 36 down to 9 appeals, and we're pretty consistent around 33% of those are overturned. And, last year, I think it just shows that we've really improved the process and what we've done, because we went from in the 30s for appeals down to 9 last year. So I think our evaluators are doing much better at following the process. So, connection between professional development and teacher evaluation. One of the best things that we've done is all of our new teacher academies. So I'm my first 3 years of teaching. Each session is designed around one of the Danielson components. So it's engaging students in learning. That's one of the Danielson components. That's the name of the training, and professional development provides training and information right around those. So that's just a great connection that they've made over there. Tenured teachers on an IDP. We've been doing this for many years, so we have a good system set up. I do a training throughout the year. I do it this time of year, and then throughout the rest of the year. They're called IDP workshops, where I have any evaluators who have a teacher on IDP, and I walk through the process with them. I'll help them build goals. I'll talk to them about the process and the steps, how to provide support. We have a laundry list of different supports that you can provide the teachers, again, to provide consistency and support for the district. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. Evaluator preparation. So anybody who does an observation has to be certified by Cambridge Education. They're an outside education consultant who's worked with the district a lot. They know our district really well. It's good too, because they also can provide feedback to us about what's going on throughout the district through this process. And all of us who have to go through that certification every year, we get so it's like the most. I just talked to another principal yesterday. We all stress out about it. It's like, our final exam. It's like passing the bar every year. So it's very intense, and you go in with a Cambridge trainer, and your ratings have to meet a standard 70% of the Cambridge trainer, and you can't observe until you pass that. Now we retrain if you do less than that, and give you more information so that you can. So that's for all of us who have been there, and for all the new administrators who come in, they do a 2.5-day intensive training. So I do that with Bridget Chaney, one of our executive directors. We've been doing that for 5 or 6 years. It's designed right around the Cambridge training that we all went through. And it's very active. We go into schools, and we observe teaching and learning, and do ratings, and tend to do well in the Cambridge certification process.
And one of the things that we, because we know how important this is when we're hiring a new principal, part of the interview process is that we have them watch a lesson. Now, this is a videotape lesson, and give feedback. We have one of the panel members be the teacher, and they have to give them feedback. And so we observe how they give feedback, what are their strengths in that, and then the panel gives them feedback, because one of the things that we want to see too is how do our administrators take feedback, because we know that's a part of the process too. So we start right from day one working on this piece of being able to give good and constructive feedback, because we know that's probably the most important piece of the job for them. So.
I think that the evaluation process is critical. I mean, it's one of the backbones of how we continue to move forward as a district, and how people looking in are seeing achievement. At the end of the day, they're looking at statistics and so forth and making decisions on that, but being able to demonstrate that that this is moving, particularly as an urban district. One of the questions that I have is in regards to like diversity, cultural competency. How is this taking into account helping equipping our teachers to become more cross-cultural, since that is an issue that it seems sometimes affects teaching?
Well, I don't know that the evaluation system takes that into effect, except perhaps
Well,
through
it-
tripod,
Well,
maybe?
through tripod, but
Right.
also through just best practice, and as
in
a
terms of
district,
the-
connecting, okay, here are the best practices around classroom management, about having a inclusive and safe classroom environment. The good thing about the Danielson rubric, it talks about the best practice and the different standards, and one of the to get highly effective, a lot of that is really all about student input, student participation, their voice in the classroom about keeping it a safe place, and that includes all the ways that a classroom needs to be safe.
I do think, though, that this is an area that we are still working on, to be quite frank. We are trying to tackle it through the professional development and then through our Office of Equity and Inclusion. I think that's one of the reasons why the superintendent established that office, is really focused on providing equitable outcomes for students. And we still, we have some work to do in that area. We try to hit it through the Haberman when we are initially hiring folks, because it is a pre-screener and it does give us some indication of some cultural competency issues. We are trying to share that more with the professional development in terms of, okay, we're seeing some trends, some weaknesses here. But we know, because of the nature of our teaching staff, and a lot of times where they have student taught, that they haven't always been in an urban environment, and it does create additional challenges for students. We like to pick up our student teachers because they have been in our classrooms and have a desire to teach here. But to be quite frank, it is still an area where we have to continue to work. It's not particularly, our evaluation system at this point hasn't particularly picked it up, because we're still trying to figure out a good way to do that. And hopefully with our Office of Equity and Inclusion, as we continue to do more research, we've hit it through some of the Harvard training that our administrators have been through. And, this is a national issue too, and so we want to make sure that we pick up some indicators that we can use, that we feel confident about, that have been validated and are fair, and that,
I think the other, as a district, I've gone through the Harvard training. Tina Watson from professional development has gone. A lot of the curriculum supervisors. So there's a lot of us whose our understanding and knowledge is increased a lot. To be able to say, okay, this is our mission and vision and the importance of it, but now to go to the Harvard training and have a much better understanding of that. And I look at it in the Human Resources Department under our selection process. So how do we measure this? So how do we look at the evaluation system and help teachers and administrators make those connections? And I think we're in a good place to improve
begin
that
to start.
process. Yeah.
And I know that we're continuing. I know that they had brought in the folks to do the big training for the principals at the beginning of the year, and that they're going to continue that. And the feedback I heard from that was just phenomenal, that it was probably one of the best trainings. And we know leadership matters with respect to this. And so that's why we have to start there. You have to build a culture from the top down around that, and it's not going to happen from the bottom up. The leader has to support that, drive that as an essential part of their building and their culture. So
And I think the fact that that we're not shying away from talking about those issues, and our teachers themselves are talking
Absolutely.
about it as they reflect with their administrators and certainly parents and so forth. So I'm pleased to see that this district is continuing to address that and being a model towards how do you address that as a community
Absolutely.
and certainly a city. So
So then,
So I think the value added to the
Yeah.
system, to the individual teacher, it provides consistent expectations for best instructional practice. So throughout the district, across the district, we always talk about, if I'm a teacher at Mulek Park, and that's where I went, so that's why I always use Mulek Park. It's a lot smaller than it used to be, I'm surprised. If I do the exact same lesson at Mulek Park and then over at Aberdeen, the ratings and the feedback I get are going to be very similar. So I think that's a really, to be able to say that I'm going to have a consistent observation and score no matter where I'm at, and just to know my expectations. I remember when I first started doing this and working with some of our teachers who were really struggling and giving them some feedback that was pretty hard for them to hear, but they really wanted just to get any feedback. They were so, this is 7-8 years ago. To put that feedback into the system and be able to get it, I think they really appreciate it. And to keep it consistent, learning was best when, learning could be better if, and next step. So focusing on the high yield strategies that need to be done to improve our practice. What do I need to continue to do? What do I need to change? And it provides opportunities to self-reflect, because at the most you're going to get 4, but we want to put in the system where teachers are going to look at each and every one of their lessons and think about, okay, these are the things I need to do. This is what a highly effective instructional lesson looks like. So I think it's a really value added to all teachers. I know when I was a teacher, I would have really appreciated that type of consistency. The other thing is we really talked about it needs to align with everything. So the district academic plan, school improvement goals, my own goals, all need to be aligned. So I think that's another way it really adds value. So I'm not doing something that's not going to be value added, just another thing on the plate. As a principal, I always talked about my teachers. I know the number one resource for you guys is time. How hard you work, and if we can make it so that we're doing the right thing most of the time rather than trying to do everything, then so that helps align that whole process. It's a growth model. We have around 1,100 teachers who are evaluated every year. Only a small percentage it makes employment, so really employment decisions are made around. It's the other 980 or 90 that it improves practice. So the growth model. If you look at page 6, if you look at we consistently in every year are helping folks get from minimally effective to effective, or from effective to highly effective. So I think that really shows the strength of it. It is a growth system. It's not, we just don't say that. It truly does provide growth for folks.
and we do want people to grow, and I think Reverend Matisse, you made the point that in order for our children to really succeed, we have to get teachers to the effective range. And you cannot just hover around minimally effective just for years and years and years. We know that has a detrimental effect on students, and so we've been trying to really say that is that you've got to get to effective, because at a minimum that's what our kids need, and so we've been driving and pushing it to that, and as you can see, we have a tremendous number of teachers that have really stepped up with the support. Well, first with the clear expectation that you're not just going to come into work and basically just ride by, and we're not going to pass you around like we used to do. and then give you support, real support, not just lip service. As you can see, a good proportion of them have really moved, and this is within that year from that first evaluation to the final evaluation. So that's another indicator that we know that it is getting some traction.
We had a Michigan Association of School Board dinner last week, and some of the presenters from Grand Valley were highlighting what, and I had never really seen this, but the breakdown of a minimally effective teacher in regards to the economic points for students. And it was quite, impressive is not a positive word, but to see those numbers, the number of students, millions of students that, if it's one teacher, but then you times that by 5 classes and you times that by X amount of years, it was like in the millions in terms of the economic impact.
Negative, yeah.
Negative. And so it was like, okay, let me step back here and really see it. I think any teacher, any administrator, district, and certainly parent would see that and say, oh, it's going to hold down to, okay, what's my kid? What's happening with my child and so forth. And the teacher too, I know all of our teachers care about their kids and realize that I'm impacting a life here. And so it just gave pause to think about how we're doing that. And it was in relations to how in teacher teaching programs, how they're really stressing how teachers need to come out equipped to teach in this diverse context that they're going to be working in. And so it was really appreciative that we were able to talk about that as a region, the many schools that were represented there, and really talk how do we work together so that in terms of our state, we continue to move forward. And I think GRPS is one of those that is moving that needle and is being an example. So I really appreciate that.
So if you look at top of page 7, we have a summary of the evaluation categories. So we're at 37% for highly effective. And I think one of the things too is that really means something to be highly effective, because there's so many performance measures in there, and you have to meet a standard. So I think as a teacher, if I was highly effective, that would really mean something to me. And so 57% effective, minimally effective about 5.5, and ineffective 0.4%. And the district has been pretty strong about, if you're an effective teacher, you teach our kids. So and the minimally effective too, we've gone. And a lot of those folks will be maybe a first-year teacher, which we tell those first-year teachers that part of our expectation is that minimally effective might be where you're at as a first-year teacher, how difficult that is to be a first-year teacher, and especially with as difficult a task it is now to teach. It's much more complicated, and there's much more accountability. I think it also goes to our strategy of trying to hire as many of our student teachers as new teachers, because they're at such a great advantage. But we looked at that, again, we used the data to say, okay, where are the trends? Our student teachers, are they doing better? So again, it's all intertwined there. Minimally effective, 5.5. I think those are numbers that have minimally effective has decreased too over the years. And again, you can see, because a lot of it's not because some people are leaving the district, though some are. It's because minimally effective folks are becoming effective. And that's really, when you talk the bottom line, it's about student outcomes. And the more effective teachers we put in front of students, and highly effective teachers we put in front of students, the better off our students are going to be.
So then that means that there are about 3,200 teachers in our district.
No, this is a 3-year trend.
No,
So
3-year
there's about
trend.
1,100 each year that we
How many
evaluate.
teachers do we have?
Just a little over, we have less than 1,100 this year.
Right around 1,100.
A little over, maybe a little over 1,000 teachers, yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
That's all I have.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Earlier, just a point of clarification, when you're talking about the observation, you're talking about a pre and post observation conversation. Is that for all 3 or 4 observations that occur, or just beginning of the observation cycle?
So, so there's 2 types of observation, scheduled and unscheduled. So in the law, it does state that you have to have at least one
So the
unscheduled. So if an unscheduled, there's no pre-observation conference because they don't know you're coming in. There's always a post-observation conference. And that, again, that's to get feedback. So you get feedback 2 ways through the Stages software. So you go in as an observer and put in information through there and then give feedback around when learning was best, when learning could be better, and next steps. So there's always a post-observation conference. Only for scheduled is there a pre-observation conference. And part of the pre-observation conference is the teacher has to go in and fill out a pre-observation form. Again, those are all questions to help them think about when I'm planning a lesson. These are the things that I should be thinking about and doing when I'm planning a lesson. And the post-observation is all about reflection. Again, we want them to reflect after every lesson, so let's provide some guiding questions and a process to be able to self-assess my instruction. And we really stress the evaluation process. It's not personal. It's not about it's about your practice and the instructional strategy you use. Let's use some different instructional strategies that may work better, or let's continue to use those high-yield strategies that you're using.
You mentioned not too long ago about where the trends, you were speaking specifically about first-year teachers and what the data might inform as far as the trends on strengths, weaknesses, maybe from a collective perspective. I guess I was just, I'd be curious to see, not to get into it now, but curious to see if you could sort of share what the observation data has indicated to us. So, for example, within the 4 domains of the Danielson rubric, is there a particular domain or a subpoint within a domain that may be getting our attention? You know, that may be sort of saying to us, that particular area is something that is concerning, and maybe we need to do more PD on that particular thing, or this particular thing is a strength, and maybe we need to celebrate that. Just, you know, anything along those lines. I'm curious, earlier, Ms. Downs-Lewis asked about seeing a copy of the tripod survey. Guess I was surprised that a blank copy isn't something.
Yeah, so the survey itself, the questions that they ask are Harvard, and it's proprietary. I mean, it's like with any type of survey. They don't want to share their actual questions. I think what we can provide is there's a report, a teacher report, so you can see the type of feedback a teacher would get, and I believe there are some
Here's some sample
questions.
So it's just like the SAT or the whatever. You don't give out the actual test.
Well, you give out old tests, though.
But, yeah, but there is no old test for this, for tripod, because they use the same questions. They're just being used with different students. So, so there is no old test, but we can give you a sample of the types of questions they can use.
About how long has tripod been a tool, roughly? Do you know?
We've been for us forever.
The tool itself.
Well, I know that they had, so in 2013, 14, I believe, is when we started using it. And I know it was out before then, but we can find out that for you.
I just was jumping online. Another question from her was about the education evaluation guide, I think is. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's called something else. I didn't see it. I searched education evaluation guide.
Did you look on the transparency report?
I did not look at the transparency report itself.
I didn't.
Is it? You look, so, because that's where it would be in the transparency
double-
report, but we'll make sure that,
You just send me a link, that'll be fine, I just look.
okay, yes, certainly,
Yep.
absolutely. But I'm concerned if you can't find it, that means
Maybe it's not
that,
quite as
that-
easy to
Yeah,
find.
well,
Right.
I just searched
That's
the
what
web.
I'm-
I didn't go to the
Yeah.
transparency tab in particular.
we'll look
check,
for it and
yeah.
make sure that, I know that we've had Sam take down some stuff because it wasn't ADA compliant. So we have to we're starting to put things back up in that form because for the actual website, they have to be ADA compliant. So the actual website version won't be as pretty, but we could get you the one that we give to the teachers that has the pictures and all of that stuff in it. Because the website one, because you have to do so much to make it ADA compliant, that we just kind of put out just the bland, these are just the words kind of thing. I don't even know if we have pictures, because with pictures you have to do these captions and things of that nature, so. But
Just
we'll,
send me a link, I'll.
yeah, we will,
just send it
for sure.
Yeah, if you can send that to
We
the
will,
team.
for sure.
to them.
And only other thing, not necessarily a question, I guess just compliment on the good and thoughtful work in general with the tool evaluation stuff is never easy. However, I would, and I don't know how we do this, but I would like to, I guess, hear perspective from not necessarily GRA in particular or Mary Bowles in particular, but I guess there's a reality. Obviously, there's always multiple perspectives to any particular thing, and not that your perspective is less than accurate, but obviously there's an appropriateness for this body to get as best as they can a balanced perspective. So I don't know, I guess I'll probably just maybe just get random feedback, I guess, in my day-to-day stuff. But unless you guys have any ideas on how, I guess, how we could receive perspective from those who are impacted by the tool. Of course, I can do that on my own, but just thought I would mention it.
I think the union representatives would be the best place to get feedback from the teachers.
So maybe in another setting like this, we would have some teachers present or administrators or principals, and just sort of reflect.
Well,
Well, I guess that wasn't necessarily what I was asking. I was just
sure.
putting it out there, more so just saying that with anything, recognize that there are multiple perspectives, and I just think when possible, it's good for us individually or collectively to, try to glean what those other perspectives might be. So I more only offer it as offer the statement as one of maybe transparency per se. I guess I don't know how to say it other than, I don't know, maybe I guess I'll do my own
How about
investigative
this?
reporting.
Mr. Ross, yeah, what about, what we're looking for, I think, is how the teachers are receiving this evaluation. And yeah, I was going to say, Ms. Bounds is here, and is this something that the teachers dread, or if they recognize it as a learning thing? But, it can't be
She's here, you
part of
can ask.
the evaluation. It can't be part of the contract, so.
She's here. This is your meeting, so you can do what you like.
Well, thanks for asking. That's wonderful. I only get people calling me when they've got issues. So nobody calls and said, I had a wonderful observation,
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
was cool. But listening this morning, I've learned quite a bit about what the administrators get, and that helps me understand where they're coming from when they do observe teachers. And in my mind, I'm developing ways that I'm going to support teachers. I'm going to give them those questions that are in the manual. that they're supposed to address before in a pre-observation or a post-observation, so that they're coming in more, I don't want to say armed, because that's not a good thing to say in school.
Aware.
Aware, but prepared to know what, it shouldn't be a surprise to the teachers.
Right.
They should be educating themselves so that they're, and that's my job, I think, to help them be prepared so that they can get the best out of it, get the most out of the observations, so.
Because that's really the goal.
Right.
Of observations and evaluations. So,
Well, and the other thing I tell teachers is they should be asking for the things they need, not just waiting for them to fall into their lap. So if they're finding that they are being marked lower on classroom management, they should be asking for professional development to support them. And then I pass that on to the team here, that we need to have more of that, so that teachers, they know they need it, it's obvious they need it, but where do they find it? So those are the kinds of things that we can share back and forth, because I hear it from that side and can look for it for them too.
Still doing professional development? I can't.
Yes, we are. We've done a lot of professional development on differentiation and creating classroom atmospheres that have ways to teach to different levels at the same time. That's a big part of the Danielson. The one thing I think I hear a lot from people is they don't know what the highly effective behaviors look like. So when they say that, you're not highly effective, well, what do I need to do?
Right,
What does it
right,
look like?
yeah.
Is there a video? Is there something? Can you come in and model it for me? If someone says you're not highly effective, so show me what that looks like.
And that's interesting because in this dinner, that was similar things that these researchers were saying as they are, what does that look like? Model it for me, and then I can reproduce it and tweak it to
Sure.
to myself. And that's where they saw a spike difference when they were able to observe that or even point that out. Others modeled it, was what made the difference. So it's
Sure.
interesting that you're
It just,
from the
yeah,
ground level.
it
You're
can't
saying
be, oh, I know it when I see it. It has to be
Right.
something a little more concrete than that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Reverend Matias, do you have anything further?
I just think that really pleased to see that we're headed in the right place. The relationships with the teachers and administrators, and certainly, our teacher reps and so forth, are at a place where we value the relationships and the work that each are doing because we want to see each other succeed. And the end result, obviously, is our students are equipped to go on to the next grade or phase. And so I really appreciate the transparency. This is really good information that helps us to know what you guys are going through, and certainly our teachers, when we get a chance to talk to them, we're able to be informed about ways that we can help them or understand what they're going through when they share stuff with us. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're adjourned.